You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 539. We're here. We finally made it. Bad Batch, Season 3, the first 3 episodes. We are going to break down all 3 episodes and get into some crazy speculations as to what all of this means. And by me and we, I mean Jonesy as well. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Yeah, you're right. We're finally here. Bad Batch, first 3 episodes in the books. Feeling pretty good about where we're at. So this is pretty exciting. How about you?
I'm doing good. I was doing the math before we came on. It's been 330 days since season 2 ended, which almost a full year there. And looking at it, I mean, it's sad to say, but we're down 3 episodes. So we're 5% of the way there to, or 30% of the way. What's that? I'm not doing math very well right now. 30% of the way through season 1 already. So yeah, it's, they couldn't have gotten off to a better start, in my opinion. And we're going to get into episodes 1, 2, and 3, of course, and kind of give our initial thoughts on the episodes, and then we'll get into the full breakdown with, all the wild speculation and everything. But before we get started, I think you've got some shout outs for some folks.
Yeah, definitely. We had an upgrade on Patreon. So welcome to the This Is the Way tier to Ronald. So we appreciate you having faith in us and going from $1 to the $2 tier. Thanks so much. And then, of course, to our now part of the tribe members, Rob, Mike, Borda, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Reader Reborn. And then our Delusions Grandeur members, our top tier, Rod, CJ, Alex, Steve, and Daz. Thank you all so much for all of your patronage and all of your support. We are excited to bring you some additional content later this weekend that we'll talk about here in a minute. But if you're listening to this and you're curious about Patreon, cantinacast.com/Patreon. Every week, Albert and I are planning to pick something out of the episodes that we get from Bad Batch and do a deeper dive into it. You're not going to want to miss this week. Albert's going to tease it up for us up here in just a minute, but it's going to be a really good one. Also in our live stream tonight, we've already got a lot of activity going. Steph, Music Train, Jeff, Skywalker's Academy, Risk, and Hard Countered. So Hard Countered making an appearance just to get some Albert love, I think, is what he's saying. But yeah, thanks for everyone. We've already got a lot of people in the background waiting to watch this one and joining the chat with us. So this is really exciting to. Oh, and my Star Wars guys, Rob's out there too. So sorry to miss you there, Rob. So a lot of people out there. So come join us on the stream, cantinacast.com/YouTube. One other thing is that if you, usually we probably should have done this before the holidays, but hey, if you're interested in some Cantina Cast swag, some a t-shirt, whatever, TeePublic has got their 35% or up to 35% sale going on right now that you can go get a t-shirt for $16. So if you need to refresh your Cantina Cast swag or you want a sticker or something like that, cantinacast.com/shop or cantinacast.com/store, whichever one is easier for you to remember. If you're curious about going and checking those out, again, pretty good pricing on that. The quality is pretty decent. They last for a while. I've got a half dozen of these things. So if you're interested about that and flying the Cantina Cast colors, we certainly appreciate that. And again, everything we make goes right back into the show, just like Patreon. So cantinacast.com/shop or /store, whichever one works best for you. What are our programming notes? I put both of them in there just in case you click one.
You confused me. I'm like, okay, which is it? Is it shop? Is it store? It's both. Okay, there we go. We put up both, and so we've met that quota. Hey, programming notes. So this week, coming up, this Sunday, 2 shows coming up. So Lauren and I will be here to talk about who is Azlyn Rel. And if you're following the High Republic, especially if you're knee-deep in Phase 3 at this point, you might be wondering the same question. So we're going to get into who Azlyn Rel is, why he is so important to everything that's happening in Phase 3. We'll also be taking a look at Edge of Balance and some of the other stuff that came out during Phase 2 where we get his origin story. Pretty cool stuff. We've been planning this show for about 4 weeks now, so that'll be fun. Then after that show, Jonesy and I are going to do our first Patreon show related to Bad Batch, as he mentioned, and it's going to be on a little project called Project Necromancer. So we're going to actually talk about, in the show tonight, we'll actually get into some Project Necromancer stuff, but the deep dive will be on Sunday, where we'll actually talk about what Project Necromancer was, how the events and some of the things that we saw transpired in these 3 episodes could possibly play into that, what's come already, and what, how does it tie into the sequel trilogy and Dathan and cloning and Snoke. all of that will be explored in greater detail here on Sunday. So that'll be Lauren and I will be here for the Az and Rel show at 9 p.m. And then Jonesy and I will pick the Patreon episode up at 10 p.m. So that's going to be a lot of fun talking about Project Necromancer. It's been a while since we've talked about that, honestly.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty exciting. I mean, you get to spend all Sunday night with us if you want to. So it's pretty cool. You get to spend Thursday nights with us because this is going to go on for about 4 or 5 hours, and then Sunday night another 4 or 5 hours. So it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, so that should be a lot of fun. Looking forward to both of those shows. And without further ado, because this is going to be long. Thanks again, everybody. Hey, if you have questions or comments, throw them in the chat. I'll try to get to some of these. We can't get to all of them, but certainly we'll pop some up here and there. If we don't hear your comment, it's usually because we've tabled, either I missed it, which is likely, or I've tabled it for a later discussion because we're going to dig into that as the show unfolds. So, all right. So we got 3 episodes. I think you and I both had anxiety going into this weekend about how are we going to cover all 3. Really wasn't so bad. These episodes weren't very long, which I appreciate, but they were I thought they were dense. At least the first and the third one was. The second one, we can talk about whether that, needed to be its own episode. I like that they sandwiched in between the first and the third episode, because I could see where, you stick it as episode 3, maybe it doesn't have as much impact. I think you get a lot of people complaining that it's quote filler. But I guess your initial thoughts on all 3 episodes before we get into, let's try to wax in. We can talk about animation, the music, right? The typical stuff that we're looking to as we're watching these episodes.
I tell you what, the one thing that jumped out to me within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the first episode was how alike this was to other Star Wars content we've had over the last 2 or 3 years, especially like Andor. I was really surprised at how well the vibe of this really felt like Andor, like the music, the cinematography, this noir kind of feel to it. It's almost like it's this classic. I think I made a post in Discord about it. It was almost like this classic filmmaker type of class that was demonstrated for episode 1, because it just felt like a throwback to the 50s and the 60s, a little bit of Hitchcock in there. We get that horror element too from episode 2, but I just love the suspense, all of the everything just kind of building up, and again, the monotony and the routine of episode 1, and it's so deliberate in the way that they bring it forward. I just really loved that. And Kevin Kiner's music was so minimal in episode 1 at times. Like there was just no music. It was just barely some sound effects too, like walking the halls of the Imperial facility, which again just make total sense. And it would have just fit so well in Andor, just like it fits here. And I just love it that we're parallel kind of content in the same era, or pretty close. I mean, roughly the same era, a little bit different for Andor, but pretty close. And that we get those very similar tones and kind of feel to it. So I really liked that. The first impressions, of course, is beautiful to look at, of course, but the sound design and some of the director choices and the writing was just really spot on and really matched up really quick. What were some of your first takeaways?
Yeah, I would agree. Like it was, of course, the animation. I don't know that there's better animation out there right now. Let's just be honest. There was moments in there where I was just literally caught in how good the animation looked, how good the art looked for even the most mundane shots, right? Audio, visual, of course, amazing. The Kiner family now, all 3 of them contributed to the soundtrack. And you're right, there were moments in there where it almost like I've never really seen this era I looked at this era of Star Wars from like a dystopian kind of standpoint, but it very much felt dystopian, especially, very much THX 1138, because we're in Tantus and because we're in a very sterile environment, and that is the Empire, at least in that space, right? And you could argue that's probably all the way out. Even the Death Star had kind of a very sterile look to it, right? But there was something about this that really weighed heavy on that dystopian aspect, which I enjoyed, because that aligns, like you said, with Andor. It's a different time. We're not coming off the heels of the Clone Wars anymore. I mean, yeah, we are, but the Empire is firmly footed now, and they've got their control over the galaxy. And you can just feel like there's something about it. There's a shadow overlooming all of these episodes, and that is Palpatine, who ends up showing up in the 3rd episode. So I enjoyed all of that. I thought the voice actors. I want to talk quickly about the voice actors. I mean, we had Angelica Houston in here at one point. We had, of course, Daniel Logan. If you didn't catch that, he was playing Mock. So coming back to that, D. Bradley Baker continues just to shine throughout everything he's done. But overall, I mean, the voice acting, the acting in general, I mean, Michelle Ong is just incredible. So we've seen so many videos of her recently, And it's hard not to picture her as some little, 13-year-old girl, and she's not. She does an incredible job. But there was something about the maturity. Like I went back and I was like, okay, this is just maybe in my head. Went back and watched a couple episodes from season 1, watched a couple from season 2, mostly listening in. But there's almost like there's a maturation of her voice, a maturation of the character, which I think you would expect. And I don't mean to sound like obtuse about that, but
well, it was very similar with Ashley Eckstein, right? With how she did Ahsoka.
Yes. Yeah. No, great point.
You really have to, right, in order to show that growth.
And to show the growth,
ways,
to sell it, right? Otherwise, it feels one-sided, right? You got great animation, you can see the characters developing, but there's no development in the voice talent, and that's just a credit to Michelle Long for what she did. So overall, I thought that was really great.
Well, and sorry to interrupt you, but I think with Michelle Long, you also see this when she interviews too, right? When that first season, there was a lot of shyness, it was a lot of maybe discomfort, or it was a lot to take in, a little overwhelming, and last season, she got a little more comfortable with it, a little more on stage with with what was going on at Celebration, and now she's like fully embracing it and much more open about how she feels about things. So you see it within the actor as well, getting comfortable with the character, getting comfortable with us as fans and the material and the stage that you brought here. And I think for Omega, it's very much the same thing. She's come into her own as a person, and she's very confident in who she is, despite her young age. And you hear and you see that on the screen, and she's really done a great job of taking the character and the writing, of course, supplementing that in a terrific way as well.
Yeah. And overall, I mean, again, I thought these were incredible episodes. Number 1 was fantastic. 3 was probably my favorite of the 3. And 2 was there. I think it was a good bridge between the 2, right? I don't know that it would have worked to have stuck this at the end. I think I had some questions around why they were doing 3 episodes. I mean, you could argue that you could have blended a couple of these, or maybe even blended all 3 into one longer one, so it didn't feel so segmented. But it was kind of nice to be able to break away and just get caught up with Hunter and Wrecker and kind of see what they're doing, and then kind of flip back and say, okay, we're setting the stage now. We know exactly how this is going to transpire. At least we think it's going to transpire. So I think it was. I thought the way they did that, and the fact that they weren't they weren't 45 minutes, they weren't 50 minutes long. They were small, they were compact, very dense in terms of what they were trying to do, and very purposeful. I think you and I talked about it in the final hype show about whether or not, we were going to get a lot of kind of sprawling stories and that. And no, it was pretty streamlined. It stuck to the script. It gave us kind of what we needed. I actually enjoyed all of the stuff that happened in the second episode. And a lot of people are saying that that's filler and it really didn't have a play. And I guess, yeah, maybe not. But from a Drengir perspective, I thought it was great. So I'll just throw that out there for anybody that's a High Republic fan, because that's all I was thinking the entire time was, oh my God, this is the Drengir project. They somehow resurrected it. But
I think episode 2 is going to be one of those that we look back on later on and say, okay, this is where that was setting some things up. I'm with you, though. I think episode 2 was important to go back and touch base with Wrecker and Hunter, so it's not all about Omega entirely and Crosshair right up front. It was still very heavily focused on them for 2 out of the 3 episodes, but to come back and catch up with them early on and to introduce some others, but also see what that journey looks like, because it and help establish some of these things are happening simultaneously and it's happening over a long period of time. And it helps ground you a little bit for how much time has gone by and what they're doing and what are the types of things what are the lengths they're willing to go, like working with the Durans, right? And doing some of that is relatively dangerous, but also what can they do? Like, how are they getting leads? How are they going to get where they need to be and where they need to go, while Omega and Cross are also trying to do their own thing inside. So I think it was important to try to see both sides as they're happening, rather than, hey, let's do all the Omega stuff and then let's try to figure out where this other stuff fits in. I like it that we're working with concurrent timelines, roughly, because we were spanning, and we kind of theorized this, that would be a 6 month to a year jump, and when we got confirmation, at the end of the day, it's about 5 months, right? So that makes sense.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So spoiler alert for those who didn't tally up, read all the tallies like we do, but they were progressive over a few scenes there. But yeah, so I think it was important for us to show that early on from both perspectives, rather than trying to jump back and forth in the same episode. I like that they took the time to just do an episode for it.
Yep. I'm going to throw up a couple comments before we get into the breakdown. So Risk is with us, says the music was phenomenal. Ohm says, hi from Australia. Great to be back into Bad Batch. Heavy on narrative. I think the slow burn first episode was almost like Kubrick. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it had that very Kubrick feeling. Nice call. Lots of gritty vibes. Wonder if David liked Andor as much as me. Let me see. There was also, some other silly ones in here, which we won't throw up. Jeff said the directing was excellent in episode 1. The water dripping, the blood testing cycle, the repetition. Really made you feel the relentless hopelessness of it all. Yeah, we'll talk about that too. That wheel
Oh, and episode 3, yeah, the centrifuge.
and
And
it was a
Stephanie
clock.
made a comment too. It was like almost like that was the timekeeper,
Yes.
right? It was like watching the clock. It was such great imagery. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was their intent, honestly. I think they were trying to show, because I mean, they kept cutting to it and they would turn and it sounded like a clock clicking.
It
and then
was so much suspense though. I mean, it was so simple to do it, and just the sound, and we had the stereo cranked up and just crunk. I mean, it just resonated in the room. It was fantastic.
Yeah, so good stuff all around there. And we got to see a mouse droid get kicked, which is always
That was
a
funny.
nice little thing.
That was
Yeah,
funny.
That was a good moment there. So, okay. All right, let's get into the breakdown. And we'll do our best to cover as much as we can here. And again, if you have questions or you want to throw in comments, feel free to throw those in and we will get to them. So let's start with Confined. And, you know, I wasn't expecting this footage. We saw it. We kind of speculated on what it was and we really didn't know. Now it totally makes sense. But we start with this crash. And really the old purpose of that whole opening scene, outside of showing off the visuals, was this shuttle crashes and this becomes kind of their hope, right? Omega's hope, her plan, her exit plan becomes a part of this. And it was also kind of to establish that, hey, Tantus is a very dangerous place.
Right.
On top of everything else that the Empire is doing outside this, quote, perimeter, horrible creatures, which we get to find out in, I think is in the second episode or third episode, whatever it is. Third episode, we'll find out what those are a little bit later. But really, that's kind of all it was, just to kind of establish and set up the dangers of Wayland and Tantus area.
Yeah, getting out of the facility is one thing, but then what do you go after that?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's very much a prison-like in that way. We start with the Imperium Mountain facility, which is what the audio descriptors called it. I thought that was interesting that they actually called it out as such. But when we start, she's only been here 3 weeks. I would imagine there was like 21 hash marks or 22,
right,
whatever the number was. So this is very early on after she's been here, and she's still got quite a bit of, I mean, she's still hopeful. Like, that's the one thing I loved about this character. And I think we talked about this in the breakdown or the final hype, was just her optimism never went away. It was very consistent, very persistent, always there. And even, 150 days, she's still thinking about how to get out of here, where, you look at somebody like Crosshair, who's the absolute opposite. But anyway, she's been here 3 weeks, feeling more like a prisoner, I guess, at this point. And then Emery walks in, and Emery's an interesting character because I think we weren't really sure where she was going to go, how she would speak to Omega, how she would treat Omega. And I want your thoughts on this, because I do want to just get this out of the way right now. I was very surprised. It doesn't sound like, at least my takeaway was, she's not so much in favor of what the Empire's doing. I don't think that's true at all. I think she is truly a scientist at heart, but she's either got Stockholm Syndrome in a way, or she's gotten to the point where she realizes the safest thing for her to do, her highest chances of survival, are just to keep her head down, do the work that they're supposed to be doing, not ask questions, not really get involved, don't play a moral card about anything that's happening around them, and you'll live. And I think she's trying to teach that to Omega, and she's hopeful that Omega is going to latch onto that and see that that is the way. And of course, that doesn't go at all how this went. But your thoughts on Emery before we go any further?
Yeah, she's an interesting character because I think it's someone who you can definitely see there are flashes of sympathetic emotion coming through, or at least you feel like the wheels are turning, right? You feel like the gears are turning. It's not like she's brainwashed or anything like that. I think you're right, though. I think she has a certain appreciation for what Hemlock has done for her. Whatever situation he took her out of and gave her purpose. I mean, you really can't underestimate how important having purpose is, and how much appreciation and what the meaning that can be to you is not. And it's not falling in love with your captor. It's like, no, they finally unlocked my potential and gave me something to focus my time on. And it's like that mentor relationship, right? And they provided you the opportunity and you seized it. And much like what Nala say, right? Her loyalty is to science. And I think Emery is very much in that same way. Now, again, with Omega, she seems to bring out these little pieces of people to where they think a little bit differently, right? Or it unlocks that part of their brain where they have been comfortable doing what they're doing because it's routine and it's what they feel is best. And they're insulated from some of the damage that they're doing or unleashing on the galaxy as a whole, even though they're probably looking at the atrocities every single day with what they're doing to the clones. But, there's some justification they've done. But when they see it through Omega's eyes and this almost pure, and maybe they might view it as naivete, but I think on some level it's also, that's the way things are supposed to look, right? Sometimes we have to step back and look at things through the eyes of a child, to kind of paraphrase Yoda in that kind of way. to give us that perspective and take a step back and say, is what we're really doing what we should be doing? And so I like that we get some of those elements with Emery. It seems like she's going to be a difficult nut to crack to get out of that routine, but you're already seeing some signs of it throughout these few episodes where that's possible. But I like this character, though. I like that she's kind of on the fence, and I think to an extent, kind of like Nala says, she is trying to protect Omega in some way of saying, look, this life is not so bad. Like, if you embrace it, you can be successful here. I was actually surprised. That's where I wanted some of your feedback. Is I was surprised at how much autonomy they gave Omega, even after just a handful of weeks in this facility, that she's able to kind of go and manage herself within the context of her tasks. But she kind of has free reign to go where she needs to go. Doesn't mean she can go anywhere, she's having to sneak away to see Crosshair. But what were you a little surprised that did she just kind of escort herself around after just a few weeks?
I think I was initially. By the time we get to the third episode, when Hemlock threatens Nalase about removing some of the freedom, liberties that she has, I think that makes sense, right? I think her being there was contingent upon some of these things that she wanted. And the reason she asked, again, this is all speculation on my part, but I think the reason why she asked for Omega to kind of have as much autonomy, as much liberty and freedom as she does, is because she was thinking ahead. Like, at some point, she's going to be able to need that, right? That needs to normalize for everybody. We saw that when she walked up to the troopers and they're kind of like, oh yeah, it's that kid again. Come on in. She needed to normalize that kind of atmosphere, and knowing that was going to be a key element of her getting away from Tantus at some point. So I think maybe I'm giving Nalase too much credit, but I think she was thinking about that and why that was, why they allowed it to happen. I think Hemlock thought, what's the worst that could happen kind of thing. But,
Yeah, it's like when you're on Alcatraz, right? How many places can you actually run? You're going to run into the water, so you're not going to really get out. I like that idea, though. I hadn't really considered that Nalase was kind of setting that up for opportunities for Omega later on to be able to have some chance at escaping, no matter what that kind of looked like.
Yeah, there's a little bit more here on Nalase. We'll get to in a second. But, she goes about her daily routine. I saw some female troopers, I guess, in the hallways. We had asked we questioned whether or not there would be other additional female clones. I don't think that was the case. Right. I think the females that we saw kind of walking around in the background were just stormtroopers, female stormtroopers. So, so just two sisters right now at this point. And then we see Crosshair, and of course, Mega's got, bright-eyed and hopeful that he's going to, even just acknowledge her. And of course he doesn't. He's lost in space and, looks completely sad, distraught. And we get into the lab where we get the first conversation. This repeats, of course, a few times here, but, they're drawing Omega's blood. Emery says that she's not sure where the brothers are, even after Omega asks. And Omega has that real sweet moment about it's kind of nice not being alone. But then Emery doesn't really give her much there. Like, there's no kind of reciprocating feelings. It's just kind of silent about it, which I thought was kind of interesting.
But I think also you look at her reaction, and it was they linger on her just long enough to, you're like, maybe she was just caught off guard by that comment. Like, she doesn't know how to interpret that or what sense to make of that comment, because I wonder if she's kind of feeling the same way. Like, it is kind of nice having someone here I can actually talk to in her own weird way. I mean, she's not really super chatty most of the time, but she clearly has an affinity, or she's starting to develop an affinity for Omega. So I'm wondering if she's feeling some of the same way, but Omega is okay with expressing herself, where Emery's basically not been allowed to, or not had a reason to in many ways.
Yeah. She also mentions that she was at another facility, and I immediately thought, okay, maybe it's the facility that, Wrecker and Hunter find in the second episode, right. Or it could have been the facility, and I forget the name of it now, if they even gave it a name. I think it was in season 2 or season 1. I don't remember, but the one that Cad Bane, where they met up to do the exchange of Fennec Shan and
I thought that
Omega.
Was that an old Kaminoan city or something?
I think it was an old Kaminoan facility, if I'm not mistaken. But I just don't, because I think when we broke down that episode, we were questioning, like, what were they doing? Like, what other experiments were they doing? Same kind of experiments, different experiments. Right. But either way, the point is she was rescued there. And then Nalase, of course, sees the samples and takes, Omega, gives them to Omega, or she takes the samples over to Nalase at that point. Gwendolyn Yo is, like, I don't know, man. Her voice is on another level of sexy. I'm just saying that, right? I know Jeff's in here spouting all kinds of love for her. I know he and I were chatting about this, I think, on Twitter or something. But he says, can't give Nalase too much credit. I'm calling her Nala Bay now. She's putting her very long neck on the line to save our girl Omega. She's the best. But yeah, I've got a whole new appreciation for her and what Gwendolyn has done with the character.
I really hope
let-
they do explore why she feels so attached to Omega in some way. It can't just be
Yeah.
the scientific aspect of it and the uniqueness of it that we're learning about Omega by the end of episode 3. There's got to be something more. I really hope that comes out before Nalase bites it.
Yeah,
Because I mean, she's basically her death warrant has basically been signed for a while now.
I think so too. I think it really just kind of comes down to, maybe she saw Omega as a creation, as an experiment,
Right.
but in that she gave life, she birthed something, not physically, right? But that was it's her baby. I think there's just a motherly bond there, and I think it was pretty evident, at least from a protection standpoint, definitely evident in this episode, in the 3rd episode.
Little
And
off
we've seen it
script here,
before.
but do you think that Emery, maybe her and Nalase had something like that earlier on, or maybe Nalase didn't realize what she had with Emery, and Emery, was moved to a different location or did something different, and Nalase had a bit of that loneliness. It was almost like that empty nest syndrome when you have your first daughter,
Right,
if you will,
yeah.
and then she kind of linked to the next one, to Omega as, wow, it's another anomaly that happened, or maybe it was deliberate. I'm not sure, but so maybe there was something there with Emery she didn't realize she had, and then lost it, and then hey, I get a second chance with Omega, and you take him under your wing, and you behave a very different way, and more maternal instincts come out because you want to get it right the second time.
I think so. That could be definitely it. Or, there could be even a competition there. I don't know. Maybe they're both vying for Omega's attention and love in their own weird ways. But maybe that's some of the awkwardness that we're seeing. But okay, so let's talk about Omega's blood, right? So, she puts it in the machine there and then realizes, oh my God, this is a match. And we'll get your thoughts, I guess. I mean, I think it's pretty evident about what's going on at this point. A lot of questions still. Like, it's just one answered, and now 10 more have opened up.
Right.
But the gist of it is, yes, there's something about Omega's blood that allows the transference of midichlorians, and we're not going to say, we can say M count, but I don't know why everybody's beating around the bush on this, but there's something about her blood that allows the transference of midichlorians from a specimen, force-sensitive being, into her blood, and there's not a degradation of M count, right? It stays the same, if not better, for some reason. And I guess my theory, going back to, I don't know if we really touched on this on air, but I would assume that either she's already imbued with a lot of midichlorians, which kind of plays into my old headcanon about her being force sensitive, along with others, by the way. I wasn't the only one that came up with this after the first episode. But, it could be that, or it could just be that, for whatever reason, she's not force sensitive now, but she's just special in that she can take midichlorians on where other beings just can't do that, right? It's a very unique kind of situation, and that's what Palpatine's been looking for. But I guess your thoughts on that, and before we move on to, I guess, what she does with the sample and all that.
Yeah, and I think it's important. You have the quote here in the notes. I think we'll just read the quote here to set the stage. The Empire seeks the reproduction of a genetic M count. I think that's the important part. Reproduction of a genetic M count, but the experiments on the specimens have yet to yield the desired result. So reproducing a genetic M count, so that means your specimen or your donor, however we want to beat around the bush with the way that we've called this in Mandalorian and other spaces too, but your donor M count is your genetic source, right? And something has to be able to accept it and be able to retain it at that level. And then Hemlock later on comes and says at that level or even greater. So if it was even greater, either one of two things happens. Either one, you're able to reproduce and you're like basically, I don't know the right legal word or the right medical terms rather, but you're able to start replicating and the force power, force being or midichlorian count can actually grow and increase, or you're going into a host that already has some level of M count to where you have a net increase in the overall M count. They're able to bond and maybe enhance from there too, right? So you're kind of looking at it from two different ways is what they want to approach it without any kind of degradation. I think why the clones are so important, I was trying to think about this, like why would they keep retesting all of the same clones over and over and over as they go through it? And maybe they've got different clones that they're doing, but they keep testing Omega over and over. So I was like, okay, well, maybe they're testing the other clones over and over too. And I think that part I still don't know that I can reconcile entirely, but you're just looking for something within the genetic code of what they were able to accomplish on Camino with all of these clones. They've done something on a scale that has not been possible to replicate, I think, probably in the history of the galaxy for the most part. And so there's clearly something unique about the Kaminoan code that they've implanted and that they've been able to seed within the all of the different clones that seems to be stable enough and be accepting enough to where this could be this is why the Kaminoans are still so important, but they only wanted the best of the best, or really, I guess, only the few that are left that are probably worth their salt, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's why these clones are still so important. That's why they're so valuable, besides being still rather plentiful to be able to try. They've also somehow accomplished and been able to survive the cloning process, which, of course, they've been doing now for the better part of 10 years, but we've historically probably been more challenging.
Yeah. There's there's a question in there. Let's see, Steph threw it, and she says, "What being are the M count samples coming from?" I think the obvious one is Palpatine, but we'll save the other speculation for the Patreon episode, because I've got other theories about who else it could be and what that actually could mean, right? For I guess the future of Star Wars, at least for the future of this whole project, which would be kind of interesting and fun to kind of tease out. So Hemlock shows up. By the way, I was way too far into Wikipedia today, and always a dangerous thing. And I was looking up omega-3 fats, right? Because I'm thinking, okay, so now that we know what omega is, hold on, just stay with me here. Now that we know what Omega's power is, or her special purposes, I was thinking, okay, so why did they name her Omega? Like, I always thought, well, that's the end. So is she the end, the last clone? And somewhere down this rabbit hole that I went through with omega-3 fatty acids, and I'm not a scientist, okay? I'm not a scientist. I don't know anything about science. But I did notice that there is an omega-3 fatty acids. There's something about the very last strand that's why they call it omega. And I'm going to pull this up. I'm way off script now, Jonesy. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to do this. But I went ahead and pulled this up because when they show this here, if you look, there looks like there's DNA strands here, or some kind of genetic strands. And look here at the very last.
It's just her chain code.
No, it's not her chain code. It's the very last strand here has a dot, like, and all the other ones don't have it. So my theory is that this is why she's called Omega, because whatever this last piece is here is super critical, super important for midichlorians to be transferred, and that's how she got her name. There you go. All right.
I can't wait for them to explain that in detail. Yep.
Everyone else, have a good night. We'll see you guys next week. Okay. So now let's say Hemlock walks in, which, by the way, again, very creepy. I mean, God, that guy is so good at just being an absolute horror. Yeah.
His obsession with his gloved hand is still mildly concerning, but yeah.
Yep. And she's, he says, "Hey, Nalase needs to come with me." And Omega is about to start walking away, and she kind of pushes her back. I didn't think anything more than just, "Hey, I don't, this isn't for you. You can't go," kind of thing. But I don't know. Any thoughts as to why she wasn't allowed to follow, or was she worried that maybe they were going to find out, given everything that just happened right now? By the way, I mean, she also destroyed the sample, and this continues on, but.
Well, I think it was just not the place and time, right? Going to the vault is not her place. I don't think Hemlock would have allowed her to go anyway, right?
Mm-hmm. I think she was off limits, but.
Yeah.
Okay, we get to the vault, which we don't find out until the third episode, but lots and lots of guards, lots of commandos, guarding this thing all the way up to the very end. And of course, in Shadows of Tantus, we find out this is the place where they're keeping all of the specimens behind ray shields, which are the dumbest things ever. We'll talk about more of that later. And then part of Omega's kind of daily duties is to go and she feeds these lurker hounds or lurker hounds.
Yeah,
I thought it was lurker, but it's not. It's lurker hounds.
Right.
And these things are being used for like patrols and perimeter kind of defense if they need it. And this is where she befriends Batcher, which I thought was very sweet. So I don't know. Star Wars doesn't have enough pets, in my opinion. I'm glad that she's got a dog now. Looks kind of like a pit bull. But any thoughts around this little scene here?
I mean, it's cute. Again, it continues to show Omega's kindness, even in, like, you can't dampen her spirit. And some people might get a little bent out of shape that we continue to show this part of Omega. I think it's also just a part of who she is, though. I think it's important to continue to show that even in these really dire, dark circumstances, that she finds goodness. She's finding connections with people, with beings. Like, she's always putting herself out there, and she's really comfortable with who she is. And I think that's an important, trait to continue to push forward and make sure is clear. Giving, she's struggled with that already, and we've moved past that. So we could say that makes her, You get the words like Mary Sue, sometimes they'll come around, but I don't think that's it. I think it's just like she just has this optimism that is okay, that she can maintain. You see her lose faith a little bit every once in a while. It does waver, but then she has something to cling back onto that says there's always hope, and she's not willing to let other people give up. And so she can't give up either. So I like that she continues to reach out and make connections where she sees a need. You know, she's there to contribute, right? She's there to put herself, you know, in a position to help. And I think that's what makes her feel good. And I think that's what we like about the character as well.
Yeah. Yeah. She's been very consistent in that regard. Always seeing the best in people. Even, what's his name? Duran character that we see in that third episode, right? She was the one that believed in him during season 1 when everybody else, he'd already, betrayed all of them, including her. But of course, Ruby was there, but more on Ruby later. But yeah, I mean, she's always seeing the good in people, always trying to help people. So very consistent with her character. You wouldn't expect her to do anything less at that point. We get the Crosshair visit, which was what we had seen already. That they showed that in the trailer. I thought it was interesting that she was having to sneak around just to get there. They weren't allowing her, which I think makes sense.
Right.
I don't know how often she visited, but it didn't sound like it was very often. Maybe it was. It seems like a huge risk with really not a lot to gain other than just trying to provide them updates.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably once every week or two at most, and just trying to, whenever she can find a moment to get down there. But yeah, Crosshairs, he knows the risk, right? He's already been busted once trying to catch out. It has now worked out for him. They like to punish him in different ways, just I think for fun, especially Hemlock. So, he understands the risks of it. And I think in some way, he's trying to distance himself from Omega and keep her safe in that respect of saying, hey, just don't worry. Just stop thinking about me, and you worry about yourself, right? And you focus on that, because I'm a lost cause. You're seeing what's going on down here. He probably has a feeling about what's actually going on with him. We see his hand shaking. We also see it later on in episode 3 as well. The effects of what's going on. We see the effects on the other troopers. So clearly some bad stuff's going on. But Omega, that loyalty to her brothers, I think to her squad first, but even to those of her kind, and she extends to Emery later on too, of like, hey, you're one of us. You can still be one of us. That chance, that choice is always there. And she's just going to keep putting it out there.
Yeah. And on that note, this is, she's telling Crosshair, like, hey, what about Emery, right? She's one of us. She could probably do something. And this is where he kind of shoots that down, is like, hey, you just trust everybody way too much. And she retorts back, you just don't trust enough. And, he tells her to go away. I think, Crosshair is, I think he's just feeling like there's nobody here that would even take me in. Clearly the Empire doesn't want me. He's betrayed the Empire. He's betrayed the Bad Batch. I mean, he almost can't look at Omega because of the shame that he feels. I think he's just okay with just dying. I mean, he can't kill himself, but I think he would be okay just dying in that cell, and that's the lot of life that he wants. But I think your point is well taken. I don't know that, we see it in the third episode. We see the softer side of Crosshair come back out, the caring side of Crosshair, the team member that Crosshair is. But I think it's still here. It's just, like you said, he's pushing her away, trying to distance himself from her to protect her. So, he's not a liability to her in the event that she does escape, right? Kind of thing. So yeah, it's all kind of sad though. I mean, to see where that character's come from the very beginning.
Yeah. It's like you said, I think he just feels like it's what he deserves at this point. So he's a lost cause, and he says as much. Everyone here is a lost cause. You should really stop coming down here and focus on whatever it is that's going to help you. Stop worrying about us.
And true to the dichotomy of the optimism and the pessimism that exists between both of them, Omega ends with, there has to be a way to find out of here. I will find it. And she kind of walks off.
Always has to have the last word, that little one, I tell you.
Yeah, she's got to get the last word in there.
Mm-hmm.
She goes back to her cell. Let's just get the water dripping thing out of the way. I don't know if you've noticed it. There was water dripping throughout this entire episode.
Was there? I didn't notice that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you look closely, Jonesy,
in the
bottom
frame,
left-hand corner in the
multiple
frame,
times. Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at the 2/3 of the frame where they showed the water dripping, I don't know. There was, my only thought is, I get it. It's symbolic, and I think I forget now who it was. The producers were talking about the symbolism of it. Although they didn't get into the details, I just interpreted that as the water is life, right? And the water is dripping, and so that hope is there, and it continues to be there because Omega is there. We don't see it dripping anywhere else. But if anybody's wondering why there was so much water dripping, at least that's my interpretation. Do you have anything else you want to add before we get to this? Because I just want to get the dang Band-Aid off on this one.
Well, I think it came up in the press roundtable, I think, with some of the producers, and I think even they were like, "It's just kind of water, It's it's imagery and it's the monotony and it's that consistency and that, just drabness of going on too. And you can interpret a lot of different ways if you want, of course, with Camino and whatever else. But I think also it just set the stage continuously of like, this is the same thing going on every single day of every single week. And Omega just kind of endures it, right? But it's also that steadiness that goes with it too. I think you could also, equate it to Omega in some ways of saying that she is that steady drop until you open the faucet up and it's all there. But right now she's got to hold some of it back. So I'll jump in the boat with you and we'll go a little crazy with it. But that you could equate water dripping from the faucet to Omega and her optimism as well.
No, bad plumbing is really what it comes down to.
That's really what it truly is. But
yeah,
it was also pretty to watch it like stream down the bowl.
Mm-hmm. This is insightful stuff, guys. Okay, so then she goes back to her cell. This is where we get the sense that it's been 21 days. We can see the marks there. And she starts, eating her dinner or whatever. And then she's got the little Tuca doll, which I thought was sweet because she is a kid. And, she had her Tuca doll. We saw her hold that thing so many times in the first 2 seasons. And so, yeah, why wouldn't she make one of these as well? But she goes to sleep. We get the centrifuge thing turning, the clock ticking. And then we get the time jump, which we fast forward now 150 days. She seems like she's pretty much, adjusted to the routine. She's acclimated to the routine, although she's still trying to get out of here, right? I would imagine that. And then we go through the drab thing, right? She shows up, she gets her blood taken. There's, no contact with Crosshair this time, 150 days later, and they're just ships passing the day, not even looking at one another. She goes in, feeds Batcher, and this is where Batcher has the wound. And of course, all this is, well, the minute she let that thing go, everyone thought, okay, it's coming back. We're going to see it at some point, right? Which is fine. But back to swabs. I don't know. I think that's the lead that's being buried here. Those are amazing. I wish I had one of those. And she goes back to meeting with Crosshair again. She starts explaining what Crosshair or what happened to Batcher. And you can just see it over Crosshair's face. He's just kind of like, doesn't really want to engage. He's probably annoyed at this point that, again, she's risking, both of them, to tell this stupid story about this, dog. And at the end of the day, what really it is, it's her wanting to connect. She doesn't want to let that go. She's got a lifeline to him. She still sees him as a brother. And even if he doesn't reciprocate it, she's not giving up. She's going to stay there and she's going to be persistent. And eventually she feels like, the ever optimism of a child or just Omega's personality is, I will get through to him at some point. He will come around. And so even though it comes across as small talk, it means a lot to her, right? To be able to have that connection still.
Well, I think it means something to him too, as you start seeing the cracks, right? What is your objective? He tries to set her on the straight and narrow too. So yeah, he's a little fed up, but at the same time, he's also like caring and trying to still steer her in the right direction and trying to be pragmatic and reasonable. And granted, he's trying to go a little overboard. Look, if I was in your shoes, I would have left you right away. I would be out of here. I wouldn't give you a second thought. And of course, she's like, you're full of it.
Mm-hmm.
She just calls him out on it. But I like that though. You start to see some of the cracks in Crosshair. You start to see some of what you knew was possible at the end of season 1 when he started to, like when they departed on the platform and she's like, you're still our brother, and those vibes. And you start to feel like, okay, there is still his hope here within him. He's just holding back, and he's just not opening himself up to it until, a few episodes later, we start to see a little bit more of it. But, and there are some cracks if you want to look for them right here. And I like that we start to see that from Crosshair.
Yeah. And this is where he says, don't risk anything for me. I belong in here. And she says, none of us belong in here. Right.
I think that kind of got to him, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
At least it looked like he did. He's like, oh, wow. Yeah. It doesn't matter what all we've done. Like what they're doing to us this is not humane. This is just not right.
Yeah. And then she gets back into her room after all that, falls asleep, and then is woken up in the middle of the night from a kind of a surprise inspection from some commandos and Emery. And this is where they take her doll. Personal items are forbidden. So just like attachments, no attachments. Sorry. Very similar to Jedi.
She didn't train to be a Jedi.
Yep. Okay. And when we get to the guarded chamber, now this was the weird part. Like I guess I don't know because we had the time jump and they left to it before the time jump. I was just kind of like, where's? I guess they're visiting this more often, but this is where he says the Emperor should be pleased we accomplished a successful transfer. So they did have a successful one. And then he goes on to say, not when the M count was severely diminished in the process. If we do not match or exceed the specimen's original count, it is a failure. So it sounds like they've made progress. We have no context of who this or what blood was used for that progress. But again, we'll get into this on the Sunday Patreon show. But talking about the strand casts that were being made, right, and whether that's the Snokes or the Dathans or whatever it is that they're doing at this point. But it could be the first one of those. I don't know, anything you want to add to this? I mean, I think it's significant in that they are making progress, but I think in Hemlock's mind too. Just want to throw this out there too. In Hemlock's mind, I think he's starting to have doubts about whether or not this is Nala Se kind of sabotaging this, prolonging this for some reason, right? And it comes out later on. But any thoughts around that?
I mean, it's very plausible too that he's smart. He knows that she doesn't want to be there, and he's giving a lot of flexibility, at least in his mind, to it. But he also knows that she doesn't really have a choice. But is she slow playing it? Is she giving him just enough to appease him, but knowing that she could be doing more for it? So he just needs to put more pressure and really put more menace and threat behind what she's doing. But this is important though, because I think again, progress is progress in some level. I think at least Nala's saying she's thinking she could draw this thing out until something else can happen, but she has to also know this is a bit inevitable in some ways. But it's akin to like Rogue One with Project Stardust and what Galen Erso was doing, like Jen's dad, of saying, I'm playing the long game. I'm designing these things into it so someone can find it. If you look hard enough, if you know what you're looking for, if you have the plans, you can do this. It's almost a similar, type of approach that what Nala Se is doing here, a bit of let's draw it out. And then is she intentionally sabotaging, some of these scenarios as well, that there might be a more accepting, recipient from it, from a host perspective, that would not consume, or that the MCAT wouldn't consume the host or whatever it might be. It's deteriorating. It's basically, decaying the blood and everything, whenever it gets, when they merge them together. So, but these are very real, problems for Hemlock, because he has to show progress, right? Because the Emperor has he's got his fingerprints all over this one, and he's the direct beneficiary, and Hemlock knows it, and he has huge aspirations, as we learned back in, in episode 3.
Yeah. Skywalker's Academy says Wicket and Black Chrysanthemum shirts, cool. That Black Chrysanthemum is a Cantina Cast exclusive shirt, by the way.
Only 2 of them exist in the world.
They won't let us print anymore. Let's see. Briss says taking the doll pissed me off. Ohm says interesting when she gave the doll back. Major gap in her armor, but no accompanying dialogue, no apparent change in character in the next episode. She's a tough one to crack. Yeah,
talking about Emery Carr. Yeah, I mean, it's moments like that. You're like, okay, you see a little bit and you interpret it, but then she does an action like that and leaves it there, and doesn't have any social skills in order to really have a dialogue with her, but knows that that's the right thing to do for Omega as a person and as her sister, I guess.
Yeah.
So it definitely opens that door. So Emery's firmly on the good guy side eventually.
Yeah. And then Jeff said, Nala Se walk so Galen Erso could run. Imperio's always putting saboteurs in charge. If you're that big, I mean, stuff's going to
bound to happen. Yeah.
Bound to happen. Yeah.
You're going to have some bad eggs. What are you going to do?
Yeah. It's just the law of odds at that point.
You're going to have some leaky exhaust ports. It's going to happen.
Yeah. Leaky faucets, no handrails. And then, so when he questions her loyalty, she responds back, hey, I'm loyal. My loyalty is to science. She doesn't say to the Empire, which I think is fair. Definitely says it's to science, and that Hemlock threatens that there's a visit from Palpatine coming. So all that plays out here in episode 3. Then we get to Batcher's release. So at this point, this far in, she's domesticated for all intents and purposes.
Right.
And so it's on the chopping block, because you can't have a domesticated animal running around when it's supposed to be feral and defensive. Interesting that they were controlling these with the collars too. We forgot to mention that, but it feels like that would have been something they could have stopped or just killed it. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But yeah, she ends up taking out the droid and releasing Batcher out into the wild, which the first thing I thought was, well, that's not good. You're going to release a domesticated animal out into the wild. Usually doesn't go well, which was Hemlock's kind of response too, later down the road here. But she says that she can't leave just yet, that she needs to find Crosshair, talking to Batcher, because Batcher is kind of like egging her, trying to say, hey, come with me kind of thing. And so he runs off, and we see him again, of course, in episode 3. And then so she what's his name? What's the guy's name? Just drew a whole blank.
Hemlock. Okay.
Comes in, tells, goes into the whole details about why, that she says she deserves a chance to live, which I thought was a good analogy for, Omega and pretty much everybody in there, right? Given they all deserve a chance to live. And he responds back, "Oh, the flawed logic of an idealistic child. No emotion, no sentiment." I mean, he's just deadpan delivery on these lines, which is just as creepy in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then says, he threatens basically to hurt Crosshair, right? Because she says, "Well, look, you're not going to hurt me. I'm under the protection of LSA. It's part of that formal agreement that we, was set up." And he's like, "Well, look, I'm not going to go after you. I'm going to go after your brother," which immediately hits Omega pretty hard, right? That's a direct line to her heart there. So. Any thoughts on this exchange? It ends with, him saying actions always have consequences, sometimes not in the way we can imagine. I imagine that's foreshadowing for later down the road, because I don't know if there was really a true consequence here, but I think there is going to be a big consequence come later down the road.
Yeah, I mean, it's an adult trying to teach a child your actions do have, like, your choices will have consequences, and you can't always anticipate what those will be, and sometimes they're going to be pretty extreme and they're going to be pretty severe. I think Omega probably understands that a little better than Hemlock recognizes too, because with the loss of tech and, they go into these missions and they charge in, and it always feels like, hey, we're always going to come out of it. Where she was, if you remember before the last mission in season 2, she was excited about it. She was talking to Fee about it's a secret covert mission. And she, it had that youthful enthusiasm for, we're going on a mission, I'm part of the team and we're going to accomplish it. Again, not knowing what you're getting into. So again, that, she's still young and naive in that way, but I think she's got a much more grounded view of it than Hemlock and maybe other adults give her credit for, given her experiences over the last, what has it been, year and a half, 2 years now with the Bad Batch.
Yeah. She ends up going back to her cell. This is the very end of the first episode. Emery walks in and immediately she fires back, "Go away." Parents, if you've got a budding teenager, you've all been here before. How many times I've heard "go away" when I'm just there to try to help love them. But Emery sets something on the floor, then walks away, and this is where she sets the Tukadal. So, again, there's something about her where, she's not an evil person. I think she's just, she's okay with the system, and that's probably, she feels like that's the best chance of survival for her. It's worked for her. Why not work for Omega? And I think she's trying to get her, to fall in line with all of that. And then it finally ends with the lurker beasts. You can hear them screaming in the background. And then we get to see Batcher, who's made it, right? Standing on top of that fallen ship there at the very end, screaming. So enjoyed it. I really liked the first episode a lot. I thought it did a great job of setting everything up, and it certainly set the tone that played that to kind of go into the third episode here.
It was really kind of a perfect episode in many ways. So it was a really great start. Let's get on to Pass the Unknown.
Yeah, no, this one was like this one. We're probably not going to do as much of an in-depth analysis. I mean, there was a lot of action, which again, we don't do justice to, trying to explain, and then the blaster bolt went this way. And then, it's just not what we do, but
yeah, just watch the show. Yeah.
Just go watch it for the action stuff. But interesting that it did start with the Durans. I didn't anticipate that we would see them again. And seeing Roland Duran, like in that Pike, I assumed, and I haven't, I mean, again, it's been less than 24 hours. I haven't gone back to see if this was the same Pike, but I think it was the Pike that cut his horn off.
Yep.
Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, it's an insult to their family, right? By doing that. And it was meant to send a message to the Durans. So message received, and they'll give it back to him full.
This is where we got Angelica Houston playing Issa Duran, which I thought she did a great job. Honestly, she sounded amazing for the small part that she had.
I tell you what, you get a better appreciation for what Roland Duran's fear of his mother was, and some of that we got back in season 1 or whatever it was, with that relationship and some of that. So it was good. She was really good. She's very authoritative. Like you sense the power immediately and just no nonsense. And you're lucky I'm giving you this audience. It's only because it's my son that I even entertain this idea, and now be gone with you.
Yep. No Ruby, which I thought was kind of a miss. I wish we would have seen Ruby, the little, what was it, caterpillar thing, whatever, the pet that Roland Duran was after. But essentially, the handing over this Pike was payment their payment for handing over the Pike was information on where Hemlock was. Of course, they get coordinates to a base that they think could be possibly it, but it's really all they got, and they leave. We get onto the Havoc Marauder. Hunter's analyzing all of the data that they've gotten, looking at the coordinates, And then they mentioned that Rex and Echo can't be there for 2 months. I think they said 2 cycles, 2 rotations, whatever it is.
Right.
And so I love that they're not going to be here in that episode, but I love that they at least reached out and said, look, we have possible lead here. There's, better, stronger numbers. It can't just be the 2 of us, because even though, I don't know, I mean, Wrecker comes out and says, look, the last time we went and charged an Imperial base, things didn't turn out so well. I think in Hunter's mind, he's still going to do it no matter what, but he's not dumb, right? The more people he can get, if he can get Echo and he can get Rex to come on board, they're going to have a better chance, but unfortunately they couldn't be. So, we know they're going to be in this season, so they're not over yet. We're not done with them just yet.
Right. And like we talked about in the final hype show, the why these moments in these episodes are really important is that we see Tech's goggles laying there, right? And we see Hunter glance at them a couple of different times, and he's struggling to do the data part. You can just tell in his head, he's like, this is what Tech does. Like, how does Tech actually do all of this? He's really, you can tell he's just not, it's not his strong suit. He's not in his wheelhouse. He's uncomfortable, and it just draws up all these other memories. And so that's why these scenes are really important. And we get this 2 or 3 different times in this episode where you're like, wow, that's what Tech would be running. Tech would be running the gear. He'd be running the handheld device. He'd be plugging into things, interpreting the data mining it, getting all the things out of it. And now it's left to Hunter to do, because Wrecker's not going to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so it's basically left on him because Echo's not there either, right? So it was either Tech or Echo, and neither one of them are around. So you could just tell he's struggling with that responsibility on top of it of just being kind of a 2-man show.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of this is going to fall on his shoulders. We talked about this, the gap,
right.
When the team dynamic changes, and we were kind of questioning who was going to fill in the gaps. And it looks like Hunter's taking on everything, because Wrecker's out here in the back, eating batteries or whatever he's doing half the time. So unfortunately, there's more on his shoulders now, since they've lost half the troop or half their group already. So they head out to this green planet, which I don't remember. I don't know that we ever got the name of the planet.
I didn't see one
ever.
No.
Okay. They get out, they scan, they realize there's an old base there. They head out to where the base is at, and it's been covered, completely covered by vines. And this is where they meet Stack and Deke. These are 2 regs that had just escaped from that base when the Empire showed up and lost control of the experiments that were going on too. I think these were also the 2 or 3. They were that group of boys in episode 1 that they mentioned. We got to see them leaving, going somewhere. So kind of cool that they came and circled back around to those kids. Oh, by the way, Deke. The name Deke is, I was just reading this not too long ago. I was reading the Star Wars, the Dark Horse comic adaptation of the original 1975-78 scripts. And one of the main characters in there is named Deke. It's spelled differently, but I love when they come back around and recycle the names. And we've talked about this on the show before, but thought that was really cool. It's a nice little Easter egg there, if that was intentional. But yeah, let's talk about the boys. So these guys were originally on Camino. We got to see that. They were being tested for their blood as well. So it looks like this was definitely where Hemlock had done this. But they went on to explain also that there were a lot of other projects going on here. So it wasn't just, this. Hemlock has probably got all kinds of crazy, creepy, experimental things going on. There's a lot of characters in Star Wars that are very similar. There's one right now, as a matter of fact, in Phase 3 of the High Republic, who is very similar to Thorian. Name's not really important, but yeah, I mean, it's just kind of goes hand in hand with the evil people. They're out there doing some really horrible stuff. So I kind of want to see more of that, whether it's directly or they run into other projects down the road of what Hemlock has done. But it's very fascinating to me that there is all this. As evil as Palpatine is, there are people that he had working for him that were able to take this even one step further, and God knows what they were, possibly doing to people or things.
Yeah, and it's good to get kind of the inside scoop from it. We're going to get it from Crosshair, of course, and we're kind of getting it from Omega's perspective, but to get it from 3 regs, in kind of boots on the ground and what was happening and get their perspective on it, as well as their perspective on how it's changed of their own brothers too, the situation as a whole, and how it shifted and how they want to view the defective clones, or defective and effective, it's another great moment. They're just small little comedic moments. We didn't get a lot of comedy in these 3 episodes, but there were a few that were good little chuckle moments. But yeah, I like these 3. I like that there was that dynamic of trying to save themselves, but also that idea that they want to still belong to a squad. They still want to be a part of something. They still have respect for what others are doing that are the right things to do, of how they were actually bred to fight and bred to be part of an army. and that some of those core values that were good in the clones that we liked in the Clone Wars in particular, and that we've seen in the Bad Batch squad in particular as well, that survives in some ways, and they're able to inspire other teams, is almost like Omega's legacy a bit with Hunter and Wrecker as well, and of what they've been able to turn. Now, they may have done it anyway in some ways, but if you remember back in the unfinished episodes, in those early Bad Batch episodes, they were very much loners, right? They didn't want anything to do with the rest. They didn't get along. They had food fights in the cafeteria. They were loners, right? And now here they are inspiring others, inspiring the youth in order to make good decisions that help not only their squad that they've got, the three of them, but also help others in need that there are their brothers as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. They've really come a long way. Of course, the situation has changed a lot. So that explains a lot of that. And so there's a whole moment there where, the boys tell him, don't touch the vines. Wrecker touches the vine and gets caught up and wrapped up in the vines, and Hunter frees him. And that was all great. And then when they kind of see that, now they kind of tell the story about what happened is that the Empire lost control of this experiment, and these vines got completely out of control. And so they did the only thing they could, which is, nuke it from space. It's the only way to make sure. So very Aliens in that regard. That's essentially what happened with Aliens too. They wouldn't just nuke the whole thing from space. And these guys got out of there before that, the bombardment started. So they're stuck. They've been stranded on this planet for, however long now, and no way to get home, which comes up a little bit later. So they end up going to the reg base that the kids are at. Hunter explains that they're looking for the young girl. He mentions Hemlock, and then we see Mox, who again Daniel Logan's playing, and Mox is like, "Oh yeah, I'm familiar with him." They get into what some of the experiments that he was doing there, and then Hunter says, "Like, I need to go check the base. Probably some clues as to where they went after this. We got to go explore it." They mention that there's no power, and that's where I think it was one of them says like, "It's no problem. We got that solved." And so they end up going back to the Havoc Marauder and literally strap Gonky on the back upside down, which I think was one of the better, like you said, there weren't a lot of funny moments in here, but I got a pretty big chuckle out of Gonky coming back, because we hadn't seen him in some time, and I honestly wasn't expecting that we would see him here. God, Wrecker's got to be massively strong to throw a Gonk droid. It's just a big battery.
Yeah, so when he runs, he'll be out of breath, but they can strap that and start jumping everywhere and be just fine.
Yeah, no problem.
Selective huffing and puffing there, Wrecker.
Yep. They go to the Imperial base, and again, there's a lot of action, a lot of tense moments here. Very much similar to like Aliens or Alien as they're walking through it. And the whole time I was thinking Drengir again. I know that's not what this was, but it had that same kind of vibe. If you read the books and the Drengir and just how creepy they were, and how because they really didn't have a conscience, they were just all about eating and feeding. I think that's kind of frightening in a lot of ways.
Okay, let me ask you though, which one did you enjoy or hate more, depending on your perspective? The Mandalorian episode with the spiders, or this one with all the creepy crawlies and everything else going on here? Like, which one was more disturbing for you? This is always curious, because the spider episode kind of freaked people out with Mandalorian, which I thought was actually really cool. Yeah. But this one was also kind of that creepiness. It was almost the same with the Zillow Beast, right? With some of those scenes too, almost horror type of an inspiration.
Yeah, I don't have arachnophobia. I enjoyed that episode. So I thought it was amazing, and the way it was shot and how creepy they were, but it never like startled me. This one was just creepy in the sense that I really couldn't see what the hell was going on half the time, because it was so dark and they kept showing the blobs. It was more about the way they set this one up, I think, more than the Mandalorian that made it creepier, but I don't know.
I always get really impressed with the cinematography in these, because you're right, it is very dark, and the way they use lighting and shadows. And if you got a TV that can get really inky blacks, but get that nice definition, that contrast, especially with like HDR TVs these days, if you can get that, it's actually really cool to be able to see it, because you do make things out. It really enhances that experience. But how lighting and the shading and everything goes into it all is actually really impressive, like technically.
Yeah. Let's see. Wrecker huffing and puffing is usually from high anxiety, climbing and being up there. Yeah, he's like the B.A. Baracas of the group. Steph says, I prefer the spiders. I hated the spiders. Jeff said, the most disturbing to me is Mando season 3 episode with the cave monster thing that came and captured Din. That was wild stuff.
Yeah, the one that was injecting and like feeding on him from the inside or whatever it was.
Yeah, that was
pretty disturbing.
Disturbing and gross. I can't get rid of that comment. Okay, it's gone now. Okay, so we get to the so they're in the Imperial base. They, and it like revs up in terms of like what they're dealing with. First, it's just vines. Then it's those squatty looking 3-legged things with little maws at the bottom on what was going on there. And eventually we get this big like sarlacc pit looking vine creature that they're supposed to fight there. And while this was going on, Mox and I almost called him Stack. Mox and what was the other kid's name?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Was it Stack? Oh, I thought that was wrong
Stack.
for some reason. Mox and Stack decide they're going to go try to steal the Havoc Marauder, right? They go back to the ship. They get in the
Mox
ship.
wants to see it. I don't know that he's like eager to steal it though, but you
Well,
can
they
tell
get
he's
in
on
there
the
and he's
fence.
like, can we, yeah, I mean, the opportunity's there. It's like, hey, we could, I think he says we can get out of here. We can leave at that point. So I think they were just want to see it. But I mean, I think they were more interested in for me, I think they were more interested in the ship. When they got there, I think their better conscience got to them, because as they were looking around, they could tell that there was a sense of purpose here, that there was a sense of camaraderie, and that they were treating each other like brothers. This wasn't the Empire that had abandoned them. These were people that were looking out for their own kind. And that's what, and it kind of leaves like, you're not really sure what they're going to do. Are they going to steal the ship? Are they not going to steal the ship? Eventually they show up here at the last minute when this, big Sarlacc pit thing is, about to eat them all. They bring in the Havoc Marauder. Was not expecting this thing to have the tentacles that come up and just start pulling down the Havoc Marauder. I was like, how the hell are they going to get out of this thing? Of course. And then,
it was like Unicron is what it felt like.
Yeah, it was just like the mall just chomping and recycling stuff there. We got to blow things up, which I was kind of sad. We haven't heard Wrecker say that. That's kind of been his tagline all 2 seasons so far. Maybe we'll hear him say that at some point here. But
I thought for sure he was going to voice his displeasure and disappointment of having to dump a whole box of explosives and then lose it all.
Right. Yeah.
Oh.
One thermal detonator didn't do it. So why not a whole bunch of them?
Didn't even scratch it.
Yeah. It was a cool effect though. I actually played it in slow motion or wound it just to watch it. But the whole implosion thing and the white light that explodes underneath there was kind of cool. So they did finally kill the creature. They jump into hyperspace, and they know now, they didn't get a lot of information, but they know at least the sector that they were headed to at this point. And the cool moment, I thought, I was like, oh, that's really cool. They're going to go drop them off at Pabu. But unfortunately, they haven't seen the trailer like we have. And I don't know that that's really the best decision, because it doesn't sound like it's going to go really well.
But it was really sweet though, because it also goes back, and I felt like you were validated, right? Because you were such a champion for, we want Pabu to be like this safe haven for the clones and things like that. And like this moment was like, they believe it too, even now,
they do.
right? So I love that that was still the idea, that was still the plan. And it almost makes you wonder, okay, how many others are going to, fall into this too? Of like, how many people are going to, like we talked about, the cavalry has arrived at the end of the season. Like you're starting to wonder, like, okay, well, where's everybody going to, we're sourcing all of these people, where are they going to come from? And you can just start to say, okay, we're starting to accumulate a few here and there already. So, but I like that Pabu was mentioned, and that they do view it as the safe haven and something that can give a future for clones that are displaced and need to find a new life. So I like that. I thought that was great.
I think the other cool thing is, because we know we're going to Pabu, we're going to see them again, and we're going to actually get to see them fight. They'll be fighting maybe alongside other, the Bad Batch at least, but it's not the end of them, right? We'll still get to see more of them. So it all ends well at the very end there. And then when, they have the same question that I think, it's funny because you think about episode 1, the first episode, sorry, and what the Bad Batch were thinking. We talked a lot about this. It's like, what do you do with it if you're a soldier and suddenly you're no longer a soldier? What does that life look like for you? And this is exactly what they ask. They ask Hunter, like, what do we do? We're soldiers. And Hunter gives them advice that I don't think he was ready to give back in season 1, but definitely now at this point. And he says, make your own path, be something other than a soldier. The first person I thought of was Cut, as well as them too. But, all these other examples of these characters. So, and then they do the whole Dutch and Dylan handshake, arm shake from Predator at the very end, right? The meme. So that was kind of cool.
But that was cool though too. Again, between Reg and CT defective batch 99. I mean, what a difference, 30 something episodes is.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry. I was just looking at the chat there. All right, let's get into the heavy hitter
things
here.
like that, because that's not true.
I know
we're
it's
not
not true.
sponsored by Chick-fil-A.
We're not sponsored by Chick-fil-A.
we're just fans.
All right, I had to take a shot, drink. Sorry, not a shot. There's nothing in here but lemonade. Okay, Shadows of Tantus. Let's open up on Wayland, back at the Imperial Mountain Science Facility. And Omega's going through her same routine, right? She leaves her doll there. Emery's there to get started. A lot more troopers running around here. We got to see that little Black Ops trooper. I called them a Black Series. I don't know, but I want to know more about them. I think we saw them in season 2, but we really haven't got a lot more information. So glad they're not gone. I imagine we'll get some more information about them, or see them at least again here.
I really hope they turn out to be some really early on, first phase of the Dark Troopers or something to that effect. I really hope that's where they go with that.
Yeah, it would be very cool to kind of play into that. And this is where Omega, senses that something's different as she's getting her blood taken. The amount of troops that have shown up here, and this is where Emery says, "Look." When she asks her, she's like, the doctor tells me informs me of what's necessary. Again, unless it means something to me or I need to know, I don't ask questions. And so, don't ask me, kid. I don't know. I don't know, but she is very much living. Emery is very much living with her head in the sand, right? Her ear, covering her ears, closing her eyes whenever she needs to, because that's the way to survive at this point, like we talked about.
I mean, it's hard not to. I mean, the things you're doing, if you have to somehow get comfortable with them. Otherwise, she probably would have taken more extreme measures with her own life, right? And done something that would have cost her life. So, I mean, you've got to dedicate yourself to something. And again, she has that appreciation for Hemlock in some way, for some reason. And so that, if you want to call it loyalty, which is maybe the best word we have at this moment for it, but that loyalty is important, and she can justify the things that she's doing, that these are for a better future, despite you have to break some eggs to make an omelet type of approach. And I think deep down she knows it's wrong, but I think you're right. She, as a self-defense mechanism, she's put up all these barriers and walls that insulate her from all of that emotion, and she could just focus on it being work. And once you've done that enough, you just train yourself to effectively be a robot. Yeah.
And that's very much similar. Yeah, you're right. She does seem very automated. She's just running day to day, doing the same routine, stuff. Yeah. Very routine all the time. Hemlock arrives, and this is where he says, Nalase needs to come with me, and she hasn't had a chance to destroy the blood sample, and you can see it all over her face, which I think they did a really good job, of course, with the animation. But she has this oh crap moment because she realizes that Emery is going to run Omega's blood into the test, and so great moment here with her kind of stepping off to the side and telling her, "Look, you got to get out of here. Your life's in danger if you stick around." And Omega hearing all this, like, what? Like, it's just all kind of piling on right now, right? And good on Omega to kind of take the initiative there, just to execute on that, right? Because I don't think she had really been thinking about this was the moment of all times that she needed to escape. And then we get she's about to mention Project Necromancer, which we find the title out a little bit later, but she tells her to sneak aboard a shuttle and to escape. This is where then they run the blood, and she goes into Nalase's lab. This is Emery. She puts the thing in there, and this is where we get the picture with the strand, the positive. It's all yellow, right? We realize that there's a definite positive take there. I think that's a little bit later.
That's a little bit later on, yeah.
It was it was the clock. This is the anxiety of the clock ticking again here, right, knowing that it's just a matter of time now before they do find out. All right, let's talk about Palpatine, because this is where he shows up. And again, I wasn't expecting him to show up in this early. I thought he'd be a little bit later. I think it makes sense. I guess before we get into that, do you think he'll be back? Do you think he's done at this point?
Oh, man. That's a good question. I think he could, if he was done after this one appearance, I think that would be okay. I don't know that we need him all the time. We've got his direct influence in it. We know his interest in it. We know exactly what he's doing now. Does he need to show up every 3 or 4 episodes? I don't think it doesn't serve any purpose for that. I think if we see him again, it might be over, HoloNet type of thing, on a projector or something to that extent. But I mean, with Hemlock has his orders, right? So I think only if he starts drawing too many of those resources that are now at his full disposal, does the Emperor start to get a inkling that something is wrong and may have to step in. But, the one thing I like about this conversation, though, was, especially when they were leaving, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but since we're talking about Palpatine, when he was leaving, he was talking about how others in their ranks would view this as an abomination. Who do you think he was talking about that would view that as an abomination? They're in the, again, he's talking specifically about their efforts of transferring,
Yeah.
effectively transferring Force essence, effectively.
I didn't put a lot of thought into that, but so I don't really have an answer on the spot. But what I did put thought into was we talked about Cad Bane and talked about other people that were going after Omega, right? And I'm just wondering now, like I think we were theorizing at least that it could be somebody, a third party. Maybe that third party is internal. That's as far as I got. I didn't really think about who it would be though. I don't know. Maybe Krennic, maybe.
So the ones that I
Thrawn?
thought would view it as an abomination was actually be Vader, of all people, because Vader in the comic books in particular is not okay with some of the things they're doing. He views the Force, for all of Anakin and Vader's faults and flaws, he still views the Force as this very pure, this very pure thing, right? And it should not be tampered with in unnatural ways. That doesn't mean that he shouldn't bend it to his will and use the dark side and things like that. They're different, right? But in the comics, he talks about this too with some of the others who have created beings, and they've tried to, do manipulations of the Force and try to manifest in other ways. And basically, Vader calls it a heresy, I think, in some ways. He calls it an abomination, I believe, verbatim in some of that material as well. So I think Palpatine's actually talking about Anakin and Vader in this specific moment here.
Yeah. Well, and that makes sense. I think it tracks too, because there was a question, I didn't throw it up because we were going to get to it at some point here, about whether or not we thought Vader knew about this facility. And my quick answer was like, no.
I think it's a hard no at this point.
It's a hard no, right? I think there's a lot of stuff like this whole stuff that others would find. Oh, I forget the quote now. But yeah, I mean, this is stuff that the dark arts that Palpatine delves in. And it's kind of his little side project stuff. I don't think somebody like Anakin would know about it. I don't think a lot of people, like even like I was throwing Krennic out there or any of the other folks, I don't think any of these folks know about it. This is a one-off project, especially so early on. I think by the time we get to, the post Return of the Jedi, a lot of other people know. I mean, we saw that in Mandalorian. There's a lot of folks that kind of are part of that inner circle and they know. But yeah, earlier on right now, there's a very, you could probably count it on one hand in terms of who knows where Tantus is, which is going to be interesting and challenging for the Bad Batch to kind of break.
Yeah, I think even like Tarkin wouldn't know about this facility. I think it's probably that tight, especially as they've cleansed the other facilities and now we've just got the one. I think, this is basically a 2-person operation, and then just the people who are living there all the time know about it, and that's it.
Yeah, need to know kind of operation going on here. They kind of make small talk here. He says, I'm most eager to see the progress you've made, Doctor. And then Hemlock's talking about the exotic matter facilities have expanded. I don't know what that is.
Well, he's preaching. We learn later on he has ambition to be the head of the entire advanced science division, whatever.
Right.
He wants to be the dean of the school, basically.
Yep.
Which was actually a little disappointing to hear.
Oh, hey, we all have goals, man. I mean, at some point.
Climbing the imperial corporate ladder though was just a little bit of a letdown for me. Like, you aspire to be so much more, Hemlock. Why would you want to deal with all the administrative and the paperwork that goes with that? That's ridiculous.
Yep.
You don't want people reporting to you. That's a terrible idea.
Ever the businessman, or I guess the businessman, Palp says, I have such need of grand designs. However, that is not really the reason why I'm here
Don't
today.
care about that. This is what I care about. Right.
And then Hemlock was just like itching to say Project Necromancer. As they open up the door there, they head into the sacred facility that's again protected by ray shields, which is stupid. And then we get to
wait, why is it stupid? Just get this out of the bag.
We'll talk about it here in a second. I've got it lined up here. Omega and Crosshair. So this is where they escape now. So she's using Nala Se's data pad. She's sneaking around, popping that thing, and this is where she kicks the mouse droid out of the lift, which is another great moment there. Sneaking past the stormtroopers, and then shows up at Crosshair cell and basically tells them, I'm escaping and you're coming with me, kind of thing, which is very similar to I'm Luke Skywalker, here to rescue you in a lot of ways.
Come with me if you want to live.
Come with me if you want to live. You want to bring it back to Terminator. And then, there's a great moment here. We won't get into the dialogue, but he's just like, at the very end of it, he's like, I had no choice. You didn't really give me a choice here. But they do get the guards to kind of approach the cell. He calls them over there. She goes around, opens up the gate. He pulls one of them in, shoots one. The other one shoots the other one, kind of thing. And, they're out free kind of stuff. But all that, again, it's all the action stuff, really good stuff. We're not going to do it justice talking about it any more detail than that. But yeah, he's like, she said, "You're out of your cell, aren't you?" Which I thought was a really great moment there.
Was.
And then she says, they take the blaster rifles and they start making their way out. And so they're talking about like how they're going to get out of here. And she's like, she mentions that the Emperor's here, and that he's like, "Oh, we'll just take his shuttle." Like that was, I like literally laughed out loud because I was thinking, my goodness, talk about optimism. You have no idea who the Emperor is. Nobody, but why not? I mean, it seemed like that was a logical thing to do, right? If there's only one ship that can escape and it's just Palpatine's, okay, that's a ship we're going after. We have no choice at that point.
Ship is a ship, right?
Right. It's all the same. It can't be any more heavily guarded than any of the other ships. But yeah, his whole response to that of like, the Emperor's here, like, oh my God, kind of thing. And she's like, "What? I didn't know." And then he said another reason why this is not the day to wing an escape, which again, just good stuff between both the D. Bradley Baker and Michelle Ong in their respective roles there. We didn't talk about Crosshair's shaking hand. You know, we saw it at the very beginning in season or episode 1 of this season when, you know, his hand was just shaking there. We see the effects later on, which we'll just kind of talk about now. It shakes here in this moment, and she asks him, are things getting worse? It does impact his ability to shoot. He absolutely misses, which, you know, I don't think any of us would have ever thought to say in season 1 or season 2. But any thoughts as now that we've had 3 episodes as to what's really going on there?
I mean, it's got to be the experimentation that's going on, because we saw it with some of the other clones as well. They were shivering in the cold. They were coughing. One guy, it seems like, I don't know if his hair was thinning, but he was like crouching and coughing. And so clearly whatever they're doing is having negative effects on them in various ways of whatever they're doing. I mean, that's the thing, we just don't know. And you could, your mind can go in 1,000 different directions, but whatever they're testing them with or pumping them full of, clearly it's either increasing the speed of how they metabolize and how they're aging to where they're having more of these, you know, arthritis type of effects, or, you know, Parkinson's type of, disease and side effects and things like that are starting to happen. You know, cancer and those types of things could start to roll in just for whatever they're doing. They're just increasing or decreasing the lifespan of the clones by speeding it up even further or faster than whatever it was. So yeah, that's the thing, when you start messing with that genetic makeup, you know, is it going to behave in ways that you were never really intended?
Yep. So this is where Omega basically says, look, you know, they talk about the shuttle already. And then she says, look, there's a shuttle that crashed outside the perimeter that will go out there and use that to call Hunter and Wrecker. Like, that's the best plan that she's got. So they go on and do their thing. We cut over to Hemlock's specimen lab, which is, again, very interesting. This whole scene, some really great dialogue here. We've got Palps, we've got Nalase, Hemlock, they're all there. And this is where Hemlock says, as you can see, the specimens are well guarded to ensure they remain viable for testing. However, with more time and additional resources, I am confident we will have a more successful M-count replication. And this is in the audio description, by the way. There's right here in this moment, it says they opened the central tower. And I guess what I was envisioning was there were all these different like little tubes, towers, things, whatever, and one of them opened, but then it said they opened the central one, which was in the middle, and that's not where they were standing. I don't know how to read into that. Maybe it doesn't really make a difference. It was just kind of weird that they said that in the auto description. But what I assume that they're looking at here are the hosts, the bodies of you know, where they plan on eventually injecting, you know, Palpatine's blood and transferring over to it, that kind of thing. Do you think we're going to find out more about this? Do you think we'll see more of this, or is this kind of be like one? I'm worried that we're not. Like, I'm worried that literally this is 3 episodes in. This may be all that we get, because now that Omega's gone and Crosshair's gone, why are we at Tantus really at this point? You know what I'm saying? I mean, Nalase is still there, but I'm worried that that's about all we're going to get at this point.
What and I still strongly believe that Omega will be back at Tantus for a big chunk of the season. I really hope we do see what's in the what was they called, the bins, or the
the Bindus.
Yeah, the tubes or whatever, like we've seen elsewhere. Yeah, the
towers
vats
is what it said, but the vats, they're calling it that.
Yeah, I hope we do see a face. I mean, Palpatine seemed pleased with what he was seeing, right? There was something in his eye that seemed to be twinkling, like, yeah, this would be great. And I got to be honest, it would be really cool if it was either his visage or even something that was starting to skew closer to Snoke, right? I think that would be really cool to finally get that direct connection in some kind of way. And I think we'll end up down there at some point, rather than just blowing it all up I have a feeling that Tantus is going to get all blown up, but it would be great to go down there and take a look and see what's happening there. We already kind of touched on this when they were taking the chips out of their heads early on in season 1, right? We already got a little flavor of some of this. So why wouldn't we have that next evolution of what's in the vats, right? So what are they brewing in these things?
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think we will go back to Tantus. I mean, I'm worried that we won't, but I think what we said in our speculation was that at some point, either Crosshair or Omega go back to Tantus, in that it all ends in that final episode of the cavalry has arrived, and it's this massive assault on Tantus. So
yeah,
either way, we'll get something there again. But yeah, so Palpatine's response to all of that is that there is nothing of greater importance to secure the future of this empire. Whatever is needed to accomplish your goal, you can have it. So I think we were spot on in the speculation as far as what he was talking about, which is this whole Project Necromancer. Quickly over to Omega's cell. This is where Emery walks in. She finds only the Tuco's doll that's left there. And then we cut over to the animal kennels where Omega and Crosshair have made their way to. And they walk in, they destroy that droid. And then Omega suggests that they use the animal chutes to escape. And this is protected by the ray shields as well. More on ray shields later.
Oh, come on.
All right, Emery then walks in, so she eventually catches up with them. And this is, they get into this like Mexican standoff where, well, she didn't have a gun, so it's not truly that. But
right.
Crosshair was really about ready to take her out, which I thought was appropriate. But he hesitated enough. And this is where she tries to talk to both of them like, hey, you guys aren't thinking straight. This is really not the way to go. And I think she's sincere in extending this offer of like, no one needs to know this happened. Like, I have a feeling that if they would have gone back to their cells and just did what they were supposed to, I don't think she would have said anything, because I do really feel like she would have tried to protect them because they are brothers and sisters. But what do you think?
I absolutely agree with you. And I think even Crosshair recognized it because he switches the blaster to stun.
Stun, yeah.
Right, because when he goes in and attacks the droid, it's on kill, and you can clearly see him and hear it click. So I think, again, even Crosshair, I think, thought her offer was genuine and was one of trying to help, again, by just accepting status quo, which wasn't gonna work, right? Because they don't really follow orders that well. So, but I think she was genuine though with her offer.
Yeah. And Omega has a really good moment here where she's talking about how she lived most of her life on Camino, right, being trapped, and that she didn't want to go through with that. I mean, that's so big of her. So we can see the maturity. We've seen it many times already, but definitely a very mature moment for her to kind of call that out. And Emery says escape is not possible. This is for your own. And then she never finishes that sentence, because that's when Crosshair stuns her, and but not before she presses the button, of course, right? And so now everybody's alerted to the fact that these two have gotten out. Then we flip back over to Palpatine leaving. And he says it's imperative the facility remain hidden and secure. There are many, even within our own ranks, who would consider much of our work abomination. Good call on the Vader. But they lack the vision that we possess. Your brilliance is a great asset to this empire. Like, I think he really likes Hemlock because he's just absolutely nuts and crazy. I hate to say that. I think it's crazy to think that Palpatine loves anybody or likes anybody. But I think he really likes this guy because,
Palpatine likes people that are useful, and that are unabashedly into what they do and are as committed to how far they'll go in order to do it, because that's how Palpatine is. He needs people who there's no wavering to what they want to achieve just for the sake of achieving it and for furthering the agenda. Now, I think Palpatine's probably not naive. People like Hemlock do tend to have ambition above where they are willing to admit it at any given moment. It tends to get out of control, but I think for right now it serves Palpatine purposes, so he's totally fine with this.
Yeah. I saw it up here. Jeff was picking up what I was talking about here with Bulan as being the other person. But yeah, I would imagine that Bulan, Palpatine,
and Hemlock would be all great friends. Yeah.
Drinking buddies. Yeah. Like every Sunday night, go out and have drinks. So I don't know why Sunday, just pick that day. Yeah. And so then this is where his ambitions come out. If I'm appointed scientific minister, I'm like, well, really? That's what you want? Bull, lame scientific minister. Come on.
Right.
I would strive to bring unleashed glory to all divisions of the Imperial Science Corps. What a cheerleader that guy is. So
I know, right? And the Palpatine just like, all right, buddy, slow your roll. We'll get there.
Yeah, he's like I think his exact words were all in due time, which is very similar. But yeah, that's really what he was saying there. And then Hemlock is finally told that Omega and Crosshair have gone missing. Then there's an alarm that's been triggered. And this is where they have to run through the ray shields. Now, the problem they have with ray shields is just simply like, why do they have to turn on one at a time? Just turn all of them on at the same freaking time. It would have solved the problem with Kenobi. It would have solved the problem here and every other place that they've ever used it. I don't understand the science behind 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or whatever in succession, other than it's certainly much more suspenseful to do it that way.
Okay.
They're dumb.
Okay. Well,
all right. Next topic.
I like my Star Wars exciting, Albert. I don't know about you. So.
I do. I don't understand it. They design so many incredible things, but
they're
ray
very
shields
consistent though, Albert.
are not
They're very
one of them.
consistent.
All right. Well, they run through the ray shields, and because they don't all close at the same time, they're able to get out. Again, it's just another flaw. Yeah, and then they get outside. They're not sure which direction to go to, and they happen to see the shuttle in space, and they go, okay, that's the direction, right? That's the flight path kind of direction. So they go out there to find the crashed shuttle. And then this is where Emery's finally found in the kennels, and she's helped up by Hemlock. Hemlock dispatches the patrols, tells them to release the Lurkas so they can go after these guys. And Emery tries to stop Hemlock from allowing the Lurkas from killing Crosshair and Omega. So again, she's still in this protective mode. I think she still sees them as brothers and sisters. She doesn't want anything to happen to them. And of course, he tells her to go back to her room or go back to doing her testing kind of thing, which is where that's all going to lead. And then Hemlock starts questioning Nala Se, and then locks her up. So Nala Se at this point, I don't think she's coming out of her cell, especially now. I was trying to think, like, is there any reason why they would pull her back out? They have a specimen now, right? The target is Omega. They've got a confirmed specimen or a confirmed post, or I don't know, however you want to look at the science here. And I don't know the Nala Se, so I imagine she is going to be locked up here for the better part of the rest of the season, unless somebody comes out and frees her. Maybe it's Omega. Maybe that's part of when the cavalry arrives. That's what she wants to do. I hope that Omega will return the favor, because this is now twice that Nala Se has allowed Omega to escape. But any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think Omega is going to have some amount of loyalty to Nala Se, given that she's tried to do what's best for her, even though I think early on she had some misgivings about some of that. So I think, yeah. And I think by locked up, I think you mean that Nala Se will be at Tantus for the rest of her life, most likely. So they'll still put her to work. I don't think they'll just leave her in the cell, but they'll definitely keep putting her to work, because I think even until Omega's found, I'm sure there's some activities they can do to try to synthesize and do additional testing, or even though they've only got a small sample, but they would be able to do something to try to help with some of that. But Hemlock's leverage is a bit gone now too with Nala Se. So there's an argument there of saying, well, let her rot, in her room, not her cell, but her room, because none of these guys are prisoners apparently. But let her rot in there until she goes, or they start to do things to her. But they can't damage her too much, right? They're kind of stuck in a rock and a hard place of whether you just kind of let her sit there, or like it seems like they were doing last season, or do you keep trying to get her to put to work, and you just threaten her and little minor torture here and there, nothing that permanently damages her, right, or her mental capacities especially. But what do you do with that? In this moment of these two have gotten away, and you are kind of stuck with your lead scientist.
Yep. Oh, look, there's some chatter here about the promotion. So says, wanting the promotion was the most disappointing moment in Hemlock's arc for me. Like, nah, just another climber.
I mean, it was just off-putting. I agree with that. It just felt a little out of place, and it just didn't. I was like, just another wannabe.
Jeff to the rescue of him says, as Minister of Science, Hemlock would fix ray shields.
I don't believe you.
He would bring them glory by finding a way to activate them all at the same time.
Yeah,
I think he's right.
With the appropriate budget and time, apparently. Yes.
Yeah, he'd fix ray shields for all.
That's
his campaign. Skywalker Academy says, yes, I hope they rescue Nala Se. I'm with you. I really want her to live, but I have a feeling she's going to die still, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think so too.
But I think we said either her, if she doesn't die, then Emery dies, but I don't think they both die. So, and we could be wrong.
I'm still willing to go with that.
One Up says he needs a bigger budget to fix the faucets, get the faucets fixed.
You get one thing. You either get faucets or you get ray shields.
Ray shields. Take your pick, man. We don't have the budget for this.
Yeah,
stuff,
and
right?
handrails are like a 5-year roadmap item. It's not,
At least
it's way
it's
down
more
the
like
road.
30 because by the time we get to Mando, they're still not working.
Yeah, it's always a victim of budget cuts.
Yep. Corporate America. All right. So then we get they deploy the shuttles after to go find Omega and Crosshair. They release the Hounds, and they get into this whole thing again. More of the action sequences here, but we learn about the Dryax, which are these kind of like bear wolf looking creatures that roam around on Tantus there. And I guess they don't really explain it. Maybe it's not important now, especially that Batcher is kind of with Omega and part of the team, but I'd imagine they use those things to kind of fend them off. Like it seemed like it was one-sided, one-on-one, that those Batcher dog things, they're not going to do much to this Dryax, but in numbers, they can certainly kind of overcome them. So cool things. I love the design of those. Emery goes back to work, and this is where we get into Omega and Hunter suddenly being attacked. They come over, they deploy all the stormtroopers. And he talks about, did they ever teach you Plan 72, which I thought was awesome because she says, yes, Tech had me memorize all the plans. And his response was, of course he did.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a good moment for him.
Do you think Crosshair knows about Tech yet?
Ooh.
I mean, they've presumably had a few conversations.
I would imagine he told her. Yeah. Or she told him.
I don't think she has.
Really?
I hope she hasn't, so we get to see the reaction.
Like maybe if she wanted to get to him, like, look, this is how important the stakes are. We've lost one of our own trying to come in here for you kind of thing. I mean, not necessarily guilt him, but certainly just kind of show him that, look, man, this is how serious we are. I think she probably would have had that conversation with him. It's unfortunate that if they haven't had it, then that's great because we get to at least hear about it or maybe hopefully see it. But if they have had it, I think that's unfortunate because I would have loved to have seen that, witnessed it, right? What his response was and all that. So I don't know.
I really want to see Crosshair on the Havoc Marauder picking up, Tech's goggles and just having a moment.
Yeah.
I just want to see what that looks like.
So the stormtroopers jump out of the shuttle. This is where Crosshair tries to take a shot and he misses because of his little shakiness going on there. Which, by the way, I don't know. I don't have a good theory as to what's happening there. I think it is the experiments more than anything else. I don't think it's anything like natural that's happening to him. But maybe over time that starts to go away because he's not being dosed or experimented on, right?
Do you think he was in pain when he was like, or he was just frustrated? Do you think?
I think he was more frustrated. Yeah.
Okay.
Like he would never have missed and suddenly he did. Right. And he had a clean shot. It wasn't like, he was under duress. I mean, it was almost like a sniper kind of shot. So,
right.
Yeah.
It's probably that crappy Imperial issue stuff.
Yep. Go third party, man. And so Omega approaches where Batcher shows up and there's, attacks some of the stormtroopers. Crosshair turns into John Wick at this point. He just starts taking out stormtroopers left and right, which I thought was really cool. And then Omega makes her way up. And this is Omega's like really awesome moment. Like in a matter of a few minutes, this sequence of events is really cool because she goes up in there. She not only takes out the pilot, then she pilots a ship. She goes back, lays down covering fire for Crosshair as he jumps in. Batcher jumps in. Crosshair takes over the ship, and then they fly away and get chased by the V-wings. But that whole sequence, like it's you think about where she was, like she was kind of demonstrating some of that in season 2. We got to see that with her, especially in the opening sequence of season 2, that first episode. But man, like she was freaking awesome. Like I don't know, it was just really amazing to see how far along she's come and how confident she is in her abilities and who she is now. Just great moment for her in that.
Yeah, and on Beacon, Halliday has it in the chat too. Legacy of her training for 2 seasons. Yeah, and I think the legacy of Tech, in a lot of ways, right, living on in her, and it's really cool. Yeah, I'm with you. It's great to see her taking the reins and being fully competent and confident in what she's able to do, and without even thinking, and they can just go and just in a heartbeat, they can snap right into this. Even with Crosshair kind of getting back into the routine, it's not with the full team, of course, but they can work and play off of each other. They know they're on the same page, work on the same plans, and they can be successful together. And Crosshair can be part of the team again, just like he could have been at the end of season 1.
Yeah, yeah. But it's good that they were kind of able to just jump right back in it and work off of each other the way they did. So this is where we flip back over to Tantus, and Emery's now loading in Omega's sample. This is where we see it glowing yellow. You get the positive red readings all over the panels and stuff like that. I guess she's a match of sorts or whatever. We've talked about that. And we'll talk about more about that on Sunday.
Right.
And then this is where the shuttle gets hit by one of the turrets, and Hemlock orders it to be neutralized, but not before, or I guess right after that. This is where Emery runs in and basically says that the clone's sample supported a positive M count transfer with no degradation from the specimen. Hemlock initially thinks it's Crosshair, and she's like, no, it's Omega. And so that's when he orders the V-Wings to stand down, because he's not going to, blow his only chance here of a successful M-count transfer. And he says, a minor setback. I will have full resources of the Empire at my disposal. We will find her. So we end, I'm going to get your thoughts on that, but we end with Emery looking very, worried and thinking about, what's to come next, as we all were, I think, by the end of this episode. But I don't know. So I guess we can end on just kind of final thoughts and questions. But I think one of the ones is you can talk about the ending here, but then I also kind of want to hear how much of the first 3 episodes changed the projection of where you thought, this whole series was going to go. Did anything change? How much of it has changed at this point for you?
I think the overall arc of it is probably still plausible and intact. What I'm excited about is that it looks like we're going to have more Crosshair and Omega one-on-one time for at least an episode, maybe 2, maybe more, something like that. So I'm actually really excited about that. That was something I was not sure that we would get beyond episode 3. I thought we would have maybe diverted here, or maybe the Bad Batch would have come in. I thought some of the stuff would have happened a little bit later, maybe a few episodes from now. But overall, I think the overall trajectory is still pretty solid, because I still think Omega gets recaptured. And again, this now makes more sense why Cad Bane is back in the picture, right? So, Cad Bane. So they're going to be on the ship. We know that it's going to crash somewhere, because we saw that in the trailer. It's not here it doesn't seem like it's going to be on here in Tantus, because they were able to make the jump to hyperspace. So, but this is where Cad Bane's going to come in. This is maybe where Fennec Shan reconnects with someone at some point, or maybe she catches wind as to Cad Bane is back on the trail of a young clone, and that sounds familiar. So it would be interesting how she gets looped back in, but some of those things make a little more sense to us now, and how she'll get returned back to the Empire, and knowing that Cad Bane is probably on it for a few episodes while he achieves that goal. So some of those things make a little more sense now, and I think the overall path is probably still pretty consistent with where we thought the general arc was going to go. How are you feeling about that, though?
Yeah, same way. I mean, I don't want to rehash everything you said, but almost verbatim. Like, it's minor setback, to quote Hemlock. But I think overall, I think the events will still kind of play out. We just kind of probably had them out of order, if that ends up holding true. So, but yeah, I mean, the idea of them spending more time together is super intriguing, because I love the dynamic. Especially, are we going to get more? Are we going to see him come around at all? More to him. I mean, let's be honest. And we talked about this too, I think, in season 2. He was never the cheerful type. Right? He's never going to be the wrecker, or even the hunter, right? Or the tech. But I would like to see that softer side of him come out. The more, team brother side start to slowly come back out of it. But he's got a lot to deal with now. Like, he's got, I think he's still going to feel a lot of shame. And if he does get reunited with the team, I want to see that dynamic and how they respond to him, how they treat him. I mean, they went in at the end of season 2 to rescue him, so I wouldn't expect it to be too different. But now that Tech has been lost, I don't know. Maybe there is some bad blood there, no pun intended. So I don't know. All that whole dynamic is going to be great to see. But I do expect Omega to get recaptured, because that would fall in line with everybody coming back to save Omega kind of thing here towards the very end. There's a question that came up from Ohm. He said, why, and we didn't really touch on this, it's a good question. He's just thinking, it was not wasted every time. Does Omega have to keep giving her blood samples? Like, why are the imps retesting samples from the same subjects in general? I thought about this in, I don't know if you have a different theory. My only theory was that with Omega specifically, right, if at any point during the development of a being, maybe they theorize that you may not be able to take a successful transfer right now, but a year from now, right, your midichlorians may have developed, or whatever that science is there, and so they retest it. The other question that I had too, that we didn't really cover too, was why did they wait 21 days to test Omega, right? Because that looked like at the very beginning, first episode, it felt like that was the first time they had ever tested her, and she'd already been there 3 weeks. So what was the delay? What was the hesitation? Why didn't they test her immediately when they got there? But I guess it's really not as important. But any thoughts around why they retested people over and over again?
Yeah, and I kind of asked the question probably towards the start of the show. I wasn't really sure either. And thinking about it more, I guess you could say that maybe they're testing other things, like some of them are testing. Maybe this is specific to the midichlorian, the M count specifically, but maybe there are other scenarios they want to test as well, so they get another sample because these are relatively small samples and they seem to effectively destroy the sample. You have a control, but each one of these is kind of a single use type of vial. So if they want to try different variations, maybe they're tweaking formulas, maybe they're whatever other contaminants they're introducing into it to try to get it to take other catalysts, if you will, other enzymes, things like that. They could be continuing to do that, and they just need to get that steady, that steady flow to where something maybe it showed promise, but it didn't show enough promise, right? And I think with Omega, since they technically didn't get a reading, they probably kept thinking they needed to do it, but how that slipped through the cracks, I don't know, unless Emery was kind of okay with that in the first place. But again, since she tested it and went straight to Hemlock afterwards, I don't know that, aside from saving their lives, that probably gets a lot of holes poked in it pretty quickly too. But that seems to be a gap there, maybe a bit of a story gap, if you will, and just one of those story loopholes. But at the same time, I go along the fact of saying that they're probably testing different things or different modifications or scenarios of what they have over time. So sometimes they want to go back and revisit it and see if they get the same result or not.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole Crosshair's hand shaking, right? That could be a byproduct of them injecting all of these subjects with different things, hoping that okay, we'll stick them with this thing, this injection, and then test and see if the M count transfer. No, it didn't work. Okay, now test them with this thing, stick this in them, and see if that works, right? And through that process, right? That's why they're retesting a lot of these. We don't know. I imagine we'll probably find out now that if Crosshair does get out. I'm sure he'll spill the beans on exactly what was going on there. But again, taking it back to the handshake stuff or the shaky hands, again, maybe that is just kind of a byproduct of the experiments that are being done on them here.
Yeah, clearly something's being injected back into them as well. So it's more than just Project Necromancer. And I think, to what Hemlock was sharing with the Emperor before, they're working on a lot of things out there. This is the premier secret facility of the Advanced Science Division.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Cool. Well, I think that was it. I mean, we're coming up on 2 hours, so we've got more that we'll discuss here again. So, as I've already mentioned a few times, but Sunday, we'll have our Patreon show and we'll talk about Project Necromancer, and we'll get into a lot more of the science, although we're not scientists. We'll get into a lot of the recklessness that comes with talking about science when we don't know what we're talking about. But we'll apply some Star Wars stuff. I've got some theories around, who are the specimens. We'll kind of weed through what's viable, what's plausible, what's not, and then how all this kind of plays into what we see in the sequel trilogy. I want to wax in some Shadow of the Sith because it was brought up there, as well as the novelization of The Rise of Skywalker. So we'll pull from a lot of that stuff as well. So it'll be fun to finally talk about Project Necromancer now that we've got some material, no pun intended, some material subject or matter here to talk about.
Yeah, we have a lot of material conversation going on in the chat tonight, Albert. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't know that. Wait, well, Ohm's a scientist. Maybe we should have him on. He can take my spot. But who are the material people that we have in the chat tonight?
Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming out in the chat. We had a lot of fantastic conversation consistently all night, which is always a lot of fun. We hope you enjoyed having some of the conversation from the chat. But special thanks to Steph, Music Train, Jeff, Skywalker's Academy, Risk Bayless, Heart Countered, Helen. Good to see you again, Helen. My Star Wars guys, on Beacon, Halliday, thank you for coming out. Good to see you again as well. Qui-Gon J, One Up versus CPU, Gary Smith, all of our regulars that come out and talk to us. We really do appreciate that. We enjoy seeing you hopefully as much as you're enjoying the content here. If you're listening to this and you want to come out and join some of these amazing people, cantinacast.com/YouTube. We'll bring it over. We'd love for you to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought about the first 3 episodes. What does water mean to you? Where does Project Necromancer go from here? What do you think about Hemlock's political and career aspirations here? Is he on the path? Is he on the right path? I don't know. And if you'd like to hear more about Project Necromancer, we'd love for you to join Patreon. Again, at this is the way tier and above, you get to this is the way tier and above, you get the live video with us. And you can join the live stream there and talk about it. Otherwise, at the We Are the Republic tier, you get the audio about the next day. So cantinacast.com/Patreon if you'd like to go check that out. Again, anything that you guys donate to the show gets right put back into it. It doesn't go into our pockets. So It's a commitment to y'all, and hopefully you enjoy that content.
Yep. Again, final programming note. So Sunday we'll be back, Lauren and I, to talk about who is Aslan Rel. So very pivotal figure from Phase 3 of the High Republic, and then Jonesy and I will pick up after that with the Project Necromancer stuff. So again, thanks everybody for coming out, and hopefully we'll see you all here in just a few days.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.